All right, Jeff, our man Keith Pompey has returned from the ugliness we saw in Boston the other night. Keith, I thought the game could be summed up in one tweet you put out in the third quarter. This is bad, y'all. Uh, Talk to us about the first two games in Boston as we head back to Philadelphia tonight.
I mean, the good thing about the 76ers is that they got the split. The bad thing is they look like they took a step back when Joel Embiid came back. The one thing is it has to do with the rust and everything like that. I also think that Boston was motivated. The Sixers looked like they were going through the motions a little bit at times. They just didn't look like the same team. The one thing is about coming back home. You kind of expect a better performance. I know a lot of people are saying they got blown out, but typically, sometimes the team that loses, the team that gets blown out, especially coming home, where role players tend to play better. They tend to play. They tend to have more fight than the team that blew someone out because they're thinking like, you know what, we crushed them. We've been crushing them all season. We're going to just handle our business, and that show up approach. So I feel like the Sixers, have a chance Friday, and they can do something.
All right. So before we get to each game individually, with regard to Joel Embiid, was it better for him to come back for game two and get his legs under him, regardless of the outcome of the game, or would it have been better for him to stay out for a game and then have to go through that for game three?
No, that's a tough question to answer. Because I asked him that after the game, and he was like, "Look, Keith, it's not going to get any better. 2 days is not going to help me. It's a 4 to 6 week injury. He felt like he was out of shape, and he felt like getting this game over with would help him. The thing about it is, Joel Embiid is the best player on the team. He's the MVP of the league. So it's one of those things where he thinks he can help the team. You bring him back. Um, they're going to have to get him back in the mix to playing with him anyway. You know what I mean? And what happens if they would have lost and then that game would have been his first game back? So then you're down 1-1 without him. And then all of a sudden you're bringing him back and he's rusty. And, so it's like a catch 22. Like people, if they would have won the game without him, everybody was like, great decision. But if they would have lost the game and then they go in there and he looks rusty like this and they lose at home, then people are saying, wow, we're down 1-2. You understand? It's like a catch 22, Jeff. It really is.
Yeah, I know, but here's my. I think that he should have come back. I think that if he was healthy enough to come back, you already got one game in Boston. You
Mhm.
might as well let him get his because he hasn't played for a while, so he's got
Yeah,
to get his game conditioning back. People don't realize that game conditioning can go away that quickly.
yeah.
But what concerns me going forward is not his conditioning now. What concerns me is something that he said after the game, which was that he was letting the game come to him. And if he's letting the game come to him, does that mean that because of his knee, that he's going to be less aggressive and therefore less effective?
You know what? The way I took it, and that's a great question, but the way I took it is, Joel Embiid, if we're going to be real, he caught a lot of flack a lot of times when he came back because the team was playing a certain way, and he came back, and then all of a sudden, he wanted to like people felt like he wanted the offense to run through him. So in regards to saying I'm letting the game come to me, now you may say he was trying to test out the knee, but also I feel like he didn't want to come in and want to be as ball dominant and gunning. And then next thing you know, if things don't go right, people are looking at him and saying, you messed up the flow of the team. So if you notice, there was a lot of times where I felt like, at least early on, he was playing as if he was playing against the Brooklyn Nets. Whereas when guys would run at him, he would pass the ball to teammates. I felt like he really was trying to do his best to be a great teammate. And then, he fell a couple of times, this and that, they're down. Then it looked like he became a little bit more aggressive. So I took it that way. You know what I mean? I did. I took it like because let's face it, if he would have went out there and scored 40 points or whatever, and James Harden and would have been standing around, the next thing you know, people would have said, I told you we're better off without him. I told you we're better off without him.
I was actually surprised with the 5 blocks in the first half, frankly. The
Yeah.
second half was what it was. They didn't play anybody in the fourth quarter, and they got blown out the gym in the third quarter. James Harden in game one put up 45 points. A lot of people didn't think that James Harden still existed. James Harden, game two, on much shorter rest, put up 12 points, 2 of 14 shooting in his encore. How concerned should I be that James Harden is not going to get 10 days off between these games each time?
I mean, it seems like that's the thing. Like if you people who if you pay close attention, it seems like whenever James Harden comes back from the All-Star break, whenever it's his first game of the season, first couple games after coming back from an injury, it's always he's playing his best basketball. Like those are the games. And the concern always is like, what can he do when he's playing every other night? Less rest, he's getting older, things like that. So, that is a legitimate concern. I also think that, Boston made a conscious effort of getting up in his skin, doing things to make him not get to those spots. But there were some shots that he had that was open and he missed. And, I think that, that's a question that is hard to answer because, right now that is his MO. Like, what happens when you're playing X amount of games? And when you look at the 76ers playoff schedule, uh, they probably got the toughest series as anybody else. People playing 2 games, then they rest for 3 days, and then they come back. And that's not really helping the 76ers. Is Boston is a younger team and they can do it. But when you have not just James Harden, but PJ Tucker and Joel Embiid with this knee, is a problem for them. It's going to be a problem for these guys to be able to play at a high level every other day.
Is that something that the front office missed in its calculation of bringing in all of these very veteran players? Is that you now had to go through an 82 game schedule and expect some of these guys that are in their mid to late 30s to hold up and then get to the playoffs and play every other day?
It's that's it could have been, yeah, but see the thing about it is I don't think see I mean, yeah, yeah, I mean, here's the deal. Here's the deal. Like, who was really out there for what they had? And the miscalculation comes, or the cap space. You're trying to get people in. You're trying to get them in. You made the trade for Harden. Harden basically took $15 million less, and they got reprimanded for tampering, so he could bring his 2 buddies in. Like the problem is, were you going to be able to go out there and get another free agent for that money? No, you just weren't. Like, so these were the best available dudes. But the crazy part is if Boston would have handled the Atlanta Hawks in 5 games like we all thought they were going to, we wouldn't be talking about this. Like they would have played Saturday, and they would have played Monday, and they wouldn't have played again until Friday. You know what I mean? So this is the crazy thing. I mean, so you got to blame the Boston Celtics. The schedule was set up for the Sixers to rest up, but Boston didn't handle his business, and now this is where we are.
So all of this talk before that last Boston Atlanta game about the Sixers actually needed Atlanta to win was erroneous, is what you're saying. That it was actually better for the Sixers
It's funny
to have played earlier.
It could. I mean, like maybe. I mean, you look at it and you saw how they won the games. Now, maybe who knows? I mean, like it is again that's a catch-22. But yeah, I think it's one of those things. So it benefited probably Joel, but it may have hindered James and PJ. Now PJ, I'm not saying he's a problem, but I know that James would have benefited from having more rest. Yeah, he would have.
The thing that
So
Oh, sorry,
Hmm?
Keith. Sorry, Keith. The
No,
thing,
go ahead.
the
Go ahead.
thing
You
that
got it.
concerned me the most last night was there was no spacing for this team. They couldn't move anywhere out there. They look like the slower team. I don't know if that was the second game of a day off, if we're going to see something different, but I felt like their lack of spacing led to contested shots that were missed, which led to Boston running out and getting these open 3-pointers because the Sixers couldn't set their defense. How do they make those adjustments going into game 3 so that they can, one, do what they want on the offensive end with Joel in there, but two, set themselves up so they can be back on defense so they don't give up these transition points?
Yeah, I mean, that was crazy. It looked like they forgot how to play basketball, a little bit. But also, it was also one of those things where, I felt like it was just a weird day. It was kind of like while Joel was trying to get people involved, they were standing around watching. There was no one cutting. It was three guys at a couple possessions. You saw three guys standing on the same side, drawing the crowd. It enabled Boston to guard half the court, and then there was really no one underneath the basket. You know what I mean? So that's where you're saying those long rebounds and going the other way. So it was bad. And to me, honestly, I wonder how much of that had to do with again, Joel coming back, and then that day. Meaning, I felt like when Joel got MVP, it was great for Joel, and it was great for the 76ers to say, we got a guy who had MVP. But I felt like it was also a distraction. Like, I felt like guys weren't as focused as they normally are because right then and there, once he won it, it was all about it's Joel Embiid day. You know, like they celebrated the day before. He said, "Oh, we only got 5 minutes and we got to focus on the game." But that 5 minutes turned into you go to shoot around, and then everybody's congratulating him there, the media and whatnot. And then after that, he goes and he has a press conference, and he does one-on-ones with TV stations, and then everybody's like seeing MVP. I felt like that had an impact on everyone to the point where they were just standing around. It was like it's Joel Embiid day. Let's see what Joel does. And guys were not being as aggressive as they normally were before, and he was trying to not be who he was before. Like so, it to me, I would really like to see what they do in Game 3 to see if this is a problem or if it was just a result of what transpired on Wednesday.
Before we talk to you about some other NBA games and series, there was something that happened last night that troubled me, which is Marcus Smart, who seems to be throwing his body around and has a history of doing this. Last night, I think it was on PJ Tucker, where he just went after the ball, whipped right into the back of his leg. And Tucker's lucky that he wasn't seriously injured. If he does that to Embiid, is the NBA going to do anything about this? Or after that incident, does the NBA say anything, or does Marcus Smart just keep getting away with, I'm just a gritty player who's just diving after the ball all the
He
time?
did something similar to Embiid, and they called a foul on Embiid for falling on him because I don't know where the hell he was supposed to fall.
Yeah, I think if that happens, and Embiid gets hurt, I think it's going to be a flagrant foul. But it was ridiculous. A couple things, like there was one point, where I think that should have been a flagrant on PJ. I mean, excuse me, on Marcus with PJ. I also think that, you know, um, uh, Jason Tatum should have at least received the technical for when he shoved the ref out the way. Like, if it is, it was like, so it was two things that I saw that happen
He
in
did it
that
to
game.
Harden in game 1 too. Marcus Smart did the same thing to Harden in game 1 where he almost rolled his ankle up too, and Harden was
Yeah,
limping.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's part of his stick. That's part of his game. I think, and I don't think like trying to hurt people. I think he plays physical. He gets in people's head. He frustrates them, and he does certain things to them. But
Yeah,
yeah,
but
that
okay. Yeah, but Keith, he knows the consequences of his actions. When you're flying at people's legs, the consequences of flying at people's legs, regardless if you're going for the ball, is a potentially serious injury. At some point, Joel Embiid is now the MVP of this league, the most valuable player of this league. Why would they not go to Marcus Smart or the Celtics at this point and say, hey, look, you can't do stuff like that. We get you can go after the ball, you can dive, but you do have to worry about whether or not there's a potential of injury here, and there's going to be consequences if somebody is seriously injured as a result.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He may get a fine later, but it's ridiculous. Like, and here's my thing: if I'm Marcus Smart, and I don't think I'm that type of person that I would do stuff like that. But if I did do it, and no one reprimanded me for it, um, I might keep doing it. You know what I mean? Until I
That's what
get
I'm afraid of. Yeah.
reprimanded. And I don't know. There's a lot of things that happen in the course of games nowadays where, let's just say, if PJ Tucker would have done something back to him, then they all would have seen that. I mean, it's just, I mean, and Doc said that a lot of things are happening. Like, look at Draymond. Draymond reacted to Sabonis holding his leg, and he stepped on him, which he shouldn't have done, but there was two wrongs that were done in that game. So a lot of times, a guy who's the instigator, unfortunately, they don't get reprimanded. It's the guy who reacts to it.
Yeah, despite the fact that there's instant replay of whatever they want during and after the game now, they only get the retaliation. We're getting towards the end. Wanted to ask you some of the other series. The NBA has to be happy. They've got major markets, New York, the Lakers, Jimmy Butler, the way he's been playing with Miami, though his injury. What's the talk around the league about these playoffs? I mean, the excitement level, the Kings and Lakers, or the Kings and the Warriors that had in the first round, the ratings are up. They've got to feel good around the league right now.
Yeah, a lot of people I talk to are. I mean, you look at it, it's weird. Like you think about it, you got the number one, a number one seed, a number two seed, and a number four seed all were bounced in the first round of the playoffs. Now, a number four, you could say, okay, that's a pick me, right? 4 or 5 things can happen, but you didn't expect them to lose in 5 games. You expect that to go at least 6, right? But yeah, I mean, there is some excitement, and you look at it, but the funny part about it is you say to yourself, is that really all that surprising? Yes and no. It's surprising because of Miami's injuries. But then when you look at Miami was a team that was basically waiting for the playoffs all year. They were the number one seed last year. The problem is they were such on cruise control, it seemed like, that they almost messed up, right? They almost like was in a deep slumber and almost didn't make the playoffs. But the thing is, it just seems like playoff basketball and regular season basketball are just two different animals. And if you got these dogs, so to speak, that's what you do. And that goes back to your question earlier in the season, Jeff. Like, you look at that Miami team, it's a team that they have a lot of older players. And what they did was, it was a matter of, we know that we have a roster that can win a championship, right? So we're comfortable saying we're not going to go out there in the regular season and try to be the top dog. We're just going to try to tread along until we get to the playoffs, and we're going to step it up. And that's what they're doing. Because you look at that roster, they have guys, Kevin Love, who they just picked up, Kyle Lowry, Jimmy Butler. These are older guys. They're like, Kyle Lowry's one of the oldest guys in the league. Same with Kevin Love. But yet and still, that's what you need. You need those veteran type guys to win a championship. But it just seems like Boston didn't help them out. Joel Embiid's injury didn't help the Sixers out.
To me, you talk about what's a surprise, what's not a surprise. To me, the biggest surprise is the fact that everybody seems surprised about the West. That the Denver Nuggets did go through the season, ended up the number one seed, and you have LA, you have Golden State, and you have Phoenix, and it still looks like the Nuggets are the deepest and strongest team. I mean, they're as of the time we're doing this, it's 2-0.
Yeah, but I also think that when you look at Phoenix, a lot of times when you make these trades in the middle of the season, and then not only that, like Kevin Durant, he's a guy who was injured too. Once they got traded, he
Hmm.
was traded. I think it's still a filling out process. I honestly think that if Golden State, and correct me if I could be wrong, but I feel like if Golden State comes out, if they beat the Lakers, I think Golden State will represent the West. I always felt that way. I did. I just did. Because I feel like you look at these teams and the three teams that you're talking about, we're talking about what, four, five, six, or maybe in the Lakers, number seven, whatever. They had injuries, but they also had older guys like LeBron, other people. And then you talk about Phoenix, Chris Paul, Kevin Durant, the Golden State Warriors. Pick a guy, right? They've been there for a while. They might not be as old as LeBron and them, but they've been there for a while. And these are all teams who know how to flip the switch, so to speak. So I always felt like if those teams stayed healthy and didn't have problems, they would be better than the other squads. I feel like Memphis is a great regular season team. Denver, they look good, but I also think that typically when you make a middle of the season trade, the last team that to do something like that and go to a championship, I think it was, who was it? It was the Detroit Pistons with Rasheed Wallace, right? I mean, was it? I mean, it's been so long ago that teams do that. So especially for a key piece, like a not like a bench player, but a key piece. So I think it takes.
It wasn't when the Sixers got Jimmy Butler?
They didn't go to the championship. Yeah, but
I
and here's the
know.
thing about that: the whole Jimmy Butler thing, and no, the whole Jimmy Butler thing is they made that trade back in November, right? So that was
Hmm.
November. So they had him for a while. That was the second month in the season, early in the season. But yeah, Tobias, no, it's hard to do that. Make a trade with a key person and win it. It just is.
All
It
right.
is.
All right. My last question for you today is if the Sixers had kept Jimmy Butler, would the Sixers have another championship trophy in their case by now?
I would have to say yes. I think they would have.
It hurts,
I
Keith.
mean, Jimmy Butler has that gene. I mean, they call him playoff Jimmy. Now they call him playoff Himmy, right? Yeah, I honestly think looking back, and I know a lot of people talk about people saying that this team is the deepest team. I don't think so. I think that this team has some shooters, it has some this, but this team also doesn't have a lot of two-way players. It doesn't, right? That team has some guys who were gritty coming off the bench. And what happened is they said, hey, but we need some shooters. So what they did is they got rid of those guys and got shooters. And now they realize, oh, we need some specialists. We need this, we need that. So I felt like that team, and you don't have to be super duper deep. I think that was the best starting lineup that they had in a long time. And, I guess Sports Illustrated agreed with it, having them on the cover of Sports Illustrated. So I think that, yeah, if that team would have came back next year, I honestly think that team would have won a championship.
We'll want for that one for a long time, Keith. It should be loud down there tonight with Joel getting his MVP award. We look forward to your coverage. Follow you at Pompey on Sixers. Thanks for always giving us some time to break it down, man.
Thanks for having me, fellas. Thanks for having me.